Okay, so back live again. Now I have my chat box back. Um, so I'm not gonna touch anything over there. Make sure I don't screw it in because it just completely disappeared last time. So I'm just gonna, if anybody was in here, hopefully you guys will jump back in. Um, but we'll wait and see. Yeah, that kind of sucked. No kinda about it. That fucking sucked. Period. So yay for YouTube. I'll be glad when I get a few people in here, and as long as the chat box is working, I can ask a question. I'll ask it here for anybody that's seen this on replay, and then I'll ask it again once people get in here. But I have a question about when I do videos and I post videos. Are you guys getting any ads on any of my videos? Because hey, John, now I'm seeing the chat box. It was gone before. So the question is, are you guys seeing ads on my other videos? Because I'm not monetized, and I'm just curious to know if YouTube is basically putting ads on my stuff, even though they're not paying me anything. Even though, I mean, I don't get a lot of views or anything like that, but it just out of curiosity, I'd be interested to know, because I do have a couple of videos that have over 20,000 views. So it would be interesting to know that if those are playing and people are, and there's ads and stuff like that, if they're making anything on it. They're certainly not giving anything to me because I'm not monetized, and I'm not close to being monetized. I'm a year away from being monetized, because you have to have 4,000 hours of watched content for a year, or within a year. So within a year's period. So it'd be interesting to know. So anyway, so we are. Hey, John, were you in here before when my chat box wasn't working? Maybe that would be. Hey, Oscar, it's back. If either one of you were in here earlier when the chat box wasn't working, I apologize because I couldn't see anything. So, anyway, so we're going to talk about the AD&D campaign that we've been playing. Like I was saying before, we closed out a chapter, and I'll go into a little bit, see if we get a few more people in here. If we get about anywhere above 5 or more, then I'll start telling the tale, and then also to talk about New World, we can talk about Elder Scrolls Online, which I started back up today, kind of as a holdover until New World launches. I've also been dabbling back in Fallout 76 a little bit, because that's vastly improved. And I always play Fallout 4, so there's always that. Been playing Quake Remastered, the old school Quake game, but with it remastered, and it's just one of those things where you can just jump in there and kill like a half an hour of just mayhem, just doing mayhem, So, how about you guys? Are you guys playing any of the stuff I just listed, or are you guys doing something completely different? And I probably started this late again. I was watching some of my damn football game. As you can see, I'm a Raiders fan, diehard Raiders fan since the 70s. So, and they continue to let me down every year consistently. See, and I don't have a PS5, so I can't play Ghost of Tsushima. Nope, I can see your message, Richie. So yeah, before that was all blank. I wasn't seeing anything. So it didn't even have the little thing down at the bottom where I could like type a message. It had nothing. It was just black. So, but yeah, if Sony can ever produce enough PS5s where everybody that wants one can get one, because that whole secondary market bullshit is for the birds, where, these resellers are, buying them up. I mean, I saw some guy on eBay, I think he had 40 of them and he'd sold 33 of them, I think. And he had like 7 left and he was selling them for, I want to say he was selling them for like $900 or some crazy shit like that. And he'd already sold 33 of them, you know? And it's like, how in the hell can these companies not put in some kind of protection? And I know they don't give a shit because they get their money either way. If they sell 40 to one guy or they sell 40 to 40 different people, they don't care because they still got their money. It just screws the little guy. It screws the end user because a lot of us can't get them unless we pay some scalper this absorbent price. So anyway, sorry about that little rant, but yeah, I'd love to play Ghost of Tsushima, but I don't think I'm going to be able to anytime soon. Not until I can get a PS5. So, I mean, I still have a PS2. That's what I've got. I don't have a 3 or a 4 or a 5. Now God of War, that looks, I never played any of the other ones, but by God, that sure does look good. Let me tell you what. And is that the one that's got Thor and Freya? I'm seeing all the ads for that because that looks damn good. Is that the one? Because yeah, if I can get, is that going to be an exclusive to PlayStation or is that going to be on Xbox too? That's the one. Okay, yeah, yeah. That character model they've got for Thor is fantastic. It gives us fat guys some hope because he's actually got a gut. It's awesome. So anyway, yeah, I hope that either I can get a PS5 or it's not an exclusive. I can look it up. Shit, I got a damn computer box right in front of me. Okay, let's see here. So it looks like I'm trying to see here. Trying to see if it's I'll have to go to Wikipedia, it looks like. So this one is going to be, I'm guessing this is Ragnarok. Let's see here. Let's see. Well, I'm not going to spend too much time trying to find this, but I'm going to assume that it's going to be another exclusive to PlayStation. That's my guess. So, but I'd love to play it. The last couple of games that I played were the Uncharted series on PlayStation, and then of course I played some of The Last of Us. But me getting used to a controller over keyboard and mouse when I've got 40 years or however many years on a damn keyboard and mouse. I've been playing on computers with a keyboard before there was a mouse, before there was a graphic user interface, and now, and then as soon as the mouse came out, I've been playing ever since. So, yeah, I'm cool with Fat Thor. The 2018 game heavily implied the gods were falling into sloth and hedonism. Huh. Okay, so there's even some logic behind it. That's kind of cool. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've heard ramblings that Sony is saying they're going to be able to free up more inventory for PS5s. Of course, COVID, I'm sure, affected it. And then a lot of people have already forgotten that damn cargo ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal last year. We're still feeling the after effects of that because everything got backlogged because that ship was blocking the entire Suez Canal for, what was it, 2 weeks or whatever. We are literally still feeling the accordion effect from that because all that shit was, people couldn't get anything And then of course they started ordering more, and there was a backlog. And then of course COVID coupled with that, the supply chain is all fucked up. I mean, the last thing I saw was that they had like 22 cargo ships in the bay of the port of LA, of Los Angeles, that could not dock because there were no slips available. Slips were all full, and there weren't enough dock workers to unload the boats the ships fast enough, so that they could, I guess they normally have kind of a rhythm where they have enough guys to unload them fast enough where the next one they can just get them out and the next one can pull in and they keep going or whatever. And apparently there was the manpower shortage because of COVID and whatever else. And now you got ships just floating in the port of Los Angeles because they can't. And that's everything that as far as gamers go. I mean, the games, the plastic cases, what you name it, the discs that have to get, if for people that still buy stuff on discs, all that stuff, it all comes over on cargo ships. So board games, all the components. If you look at board game Kickstarters, they're all late to fulfill because, number one, they're always late to fulfill because it's a Kickstarter. But on top of that, it's even worse because they can't get the stuff printed fast enough over in China, the games, and then the fulfillment houses put everything together. Everything's printed, it goes to a fulfillment house, all the pieces and everything go into the boxes, and then the fulfillment house ships it. And all along that supply chain, everything is fucked up. So that's why we're, as far as gaming supplies, games, you name it, everything's on back order, everything's screwed up. So anyway, well, it doesn't look like we're going to get any more people in here anytime soon. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys what we did back here with the AD&D campaign. So to get you caught up, and I'll do this real quick, if you haven't been following along, the crew is going through the Temple of Elemental Evil right now. And of course, it's a huge mega dungeon. And they have to keep going back and forth through there, and that's normal for anybody that's ever played that dungeon. That is at 100% normal the way it goes. And so one of the things I did was to kind of spice it up was I created a side quest kind of a thing, where I had this Baron or Duke or whatever. God, I can never think of the damn title of this guy. The Viscount. I've got it written down this time. This Viscount who sends out this message saying, hey, there's this like undead thing that's taken over my keep, my castle, and we've had to yes, that is tea, Colin, 100% right there. That is black tea. Yep. So so he puts out this call, and they decide to take a break from the temple. They decide, hey, we're going to go investigate this shade thing. So they get there, and the guy says, hey, yeah, there's this thing calling itself the Shade. It's in the catacombs down below, because in their keep, mind you, this keep has been in the generations. It's been passed on generation to generation. And, in the medieval times, of course, the keeps in the basements, they had like a regular basement. And then below that, they usually had a catacombs where they had like tombs and sarcophagi of all their ancestors. That's where they would be buried at and everything. So this is no different. And what had happened was that thing was full. The catacombs were full. There was no more room for sarcophagi, tombs, nothing. So he ordered that they knock out a wall or something and try and expand it, and do a dig and expand it. Well, when they knocked down the wall to do an expansion in the catacombs, they released something. And the something that they released was calling itself the Shade. And it was demanding in a very, and let's see if I can recreate it here, kind of impromptu. It's a good thing I've been drinking the tea. But the Shade speaks kind of like this. He says things to the effect of, where is my tribute? I demand my tribute, and I demand it now. And if I do not have my demands met, people will begin to die. That, that type of thing, right? And I think I even get a little bit more into it, during the game, whatever. But so that's how I play the Shade. And he was staying in behind the busted out wall. He was staying back there, and they could see like his form, like a misty form, or whatever. But it scared the shit out of these guys, of course, with this booming voice, and it looks like a fucking ghost or whatever. And so the Viscount, as egotistical as he is, he decided to just ignore it and say, oh, it's just bullshit, just block that off, and we'll figure out something. And then, they keep hearing voices screaming about tribute and all these other things. And that goes on for a little bit. And then people start disappearing. His workers, like maids and butlers and, whatever, cooks and whatever. Some of them start disappearing, like just gone, vanished, And so the Viscount gets a little worried, like, okay, what's happening? So he decides to start putting this tribute, as he, interprets it, such as like gold and treasures and whatever, down by the Shades area down there, just kind of dumps it off down there, thinking that here's your tribute, stop killing my people or taking my people or whatever. And it doesn't work. Now, the reason that it doesn't work is because the Viscount has a right-hand person called Astorga. Yeah, her name was Astorga. And she had been like his advisor for a while, and he was loyal to her, she was loyal to him, etc. But there was also an affair going on. He was banging her too. So even though he was this Viscount was a married guy, and so she gets ingratiated with him, this Astorga, and he begins to trust her beyond reproach. Like he doesn't question her at all, of course, right? Well, it turns out that she is from the Temple of Elemental Evil. And they have, she is one of possibly many that they have sent out throughout the land to ingratiate themselves, to infiltrate themselves into these wealthy, powerful people's, holdings, for the reason of trying to help the temple, through a subversive means. And so what happens is, with this Shade thing happening, she decides to take advantage of it, and she has had a secret tunnel dug down there by workers from the temple that she has had brought in, and she even has a little room for them down there, a little in behind the secret doors and everything. She has this little garrison for them where they sleep and everything. And what's happening is all the tribute that everybody's bringing for the Shade, all that tribute, Astorga's people are taking it, and they're loading it up, and they're taking it to the Temple of Elemental Evil to help finance the temple. And they're doing it with like a mine cart. They've got a mine cart down there, filling the mine up cart, and they're taking it out, and it goes up to where they can load it up, to like the surface, and then there's wagons that take it the rest of the way. So the Viscount thinks, well, shit, we're giving this guy all this tribute shit, and it doesn't seem to matter or whatever. Well, the bottom line is, number one, the Shade is not seeing most of that, except for maybe stuff that doesn't interest the temple. It's not of value or whatever. It's just, who knows what. And hey, Chupa, so he's getting madder. The Shade's getting madder and madder because his demands aren't being met and everything, and more people are disappearing. So the Viscount says, we're going to evacuate, and he evacuates everybody from the keep. And then he tells other land barons under his control, because he's a Viscount and baron is below that, the barons around here, he's demanding that they bring tribute stuff for the Shade to his keep, and they're taking it down. And of course, it's going to the fucking Temple of Elemental Evil, and he doesn't know it. Astorga's behind the whole thing. So our crew gets there, and he hires him, and he says, hey, I'm gonna pay you guys 25,000 gold each if you can get this Shade out of my hair and let us get back to our keep and get back to our way of life, etc. And he's holed up now. Him and his entourage are holed up at the local tavern because they've had to evacuate the keep. So the crew goes in and they start investigating, and it's abandoned, of course. They do stumble upon one. I think it was a shadow or a specter. It was a specter. One of the specters had escaped from the enclosed area down there at some point. And the Shade has he has no interest of leaving that area. He just wants his tribute so he can rest eternally. But one of his specters had escaped and was in one of the rooms, and our crew found it and had to fight that son bitch, and that was tough. And so they make it down to the Shade, and he explains to them, "Hey, I want everything that used to adorn this keep from my family. I want the paintings. I want the candelabra. I want the artwork. I want the, whatever the trophies from the walls. I want the, and all this stuff." And he says, "If I get that, I will be able to rest in slumber." And that's, if you look up a Shade in like the, I think it's in the Fiend Folio, it basically says they're dead, but they're not undead. They're kind of in the middle, like in a limbo situation. And they demand whatever it is that they want, and then once that's satiated, then they can move on to the afterlife or whatever. And so he tells them that. And so now our crew is faced with, okay, we go get his shit, and they find the secret door to the hidden area where Astorga's people have been staying, and then smuggling everything out, all the tribute stuff out to the temple. And they end up fighting everybody in there. There's like a guard captain in there, and then the workers, and maybe a sergeant or something like that. And they end up fighting everybody in there, and they win, of course. And Astorga, in the middle of it, she realizes that it's going poorly. She's watching from somewhere, and at some point she gets into a panic and says, "Crap, this is going sideways." And she's a powerful magic user, so she figures, I'll just appear, whether she had on a ring of invisibility, who knows, but she just appears in the middle of the fight to like cast a lightning bolt and just eviscerate everybody. But there was one of our characters, I think it was the assassin, who just happened to be close enough to her when she appeared that he could try an assassination attempt, and he rolled it, and he killed her instantly, I think it was. Or it was either that, or there was also a hold person that was cast, perfect timing, and it got I think it got like the lieutenant and the sergeant or whatever. Between those two things, they were able to, because that was going to be a tough fight, but they timed that shit just right. So they basically uncover, they capture one of the guys. They didn't kill everybody. They captured one, and they questioned him, and that's how they found out about what this tunnel was, and it's going to stuff's being taken to the temple, and Astorga was actually a spy, and the whole bit. So they go back to the Viscount, and they tell the Viscount and they bring Astorga's body, and they say, "Hey, here's your problem. The Shade has not been getting his shit that you guys have been bringing. Number one, because it's all been going to the temple, and she was your spot. She was the one who was behind the whole thing." Now, the Viscount, of course, remember, that was his confidant, but he was also romantically involved with her too. So he is visibly shaken by this news and seeing that she's dead there and everything. And then they explain, look, number one, the shit that you've been giving the Shade, he ain't been getting it. Number two, that's not the stuff he wants anyway. He wants his shit, his family stuff restored. And we believe it's been taken to the Temple of Elemental Evil. So what I did there is I tied everything back together so that now you have this tied in with them going back to the temple. So he says, okay, well, your reward stands. If you go get that stuff, you give it to him. He's happy. He goes into eternal slumber or whatever, and we get our keep back. You get paid, blah, blah, And they, of course, say, well, wait a second. Now, we've already done some goddamn work here. We need a little scratch, And so he agrees to give them each 5,000 gold from the 25,000 each for what they've done to this point. So that, satisfies them for a while and say, okay, so they decide they're going to go back to the temple anyway. They're going to kill two birds with one stone. So, as you know, then they went back to the temple and they did multiple forays. And the um, the guy that they captured, he ended up swearing his loyalty to the cleric, who was the only one in the party who said, let's save this guy. Let's let him redeem himself. Because he said, look, I've seen the evil side, and this is where it's gotten me. It's gotten me nothing but, pain and suffering, etc. He goes, I swear to, and her deity is Cuthbert. He says, I'll swear my fealty to Cuthbert if you give me a chance. And everybody else in the party wants to kill this dude. And the cleric says, no, I'm going to give him a chance. I want to try and redeem him and so forth. And so basically she does. He says, I'm going to turn over a leaf, blah, blah, blah. And they go back to temple. And he's been trying to tell them the whole time that stuff's been being taken back to the ruined guardhouse. There's a ruined tower at the Temple of Elemental Evil on the surface. And they're aware of it. They've been there before. Our group has been there before. But for whatever reason, they keep going in through the back way. They keep going through this little farmhouse that has a hatch, and it takes them to a tunnel, and the tunnel takes them down into the temple. And that's how they've been going. Now, they did this about 3 or 4 times. And finally, playing this other character, and I always forget his name, but because he's an NPC. But I always, I told him again, I said, hey guys, don't forget, I think this stuff we're looking for is actually at the guard tower. And they finally took the bait. They finally said, oh yeah, you know what? As a matter of fact, maybe we should look there. So they go to the tower. They had to fight a bunch of ravens that were there at the tower that guard the tower. And then there were patrols that were going around. They had to fight those simultaneously. They get into the tower. And sure enough, there's a bunch of artwork and stuff just kind of piled there. There's no gold. There's no value, nothing like, there's no like jewels. There's no gems. There's no gold. But there's just paintings, and there's some candelabra. There's a bust that has a name on it. And the shade, he gave his name as Baron Logan Seaborn when they were talking to the shade. Well, this bust has the name Baron Stefan Seaborn. So they don't know if this is one of his ancestors. They don't know. But they decide, okay, well, this must be the stuff. So they gather it up. They take it back. So they go to the Viscount first, and they explain, or no, I take that back. They went to the keep first, and they took the shade, his stuff. And so they said, here is your things. We're going to put them back where they belong, et cetera, et cetera. And the shade says, well, what guarantee is there that this current so-called occupant of my keep is going to honor my wish and leave my belongings on display as I wish, and so the group's deciding, well, do we just attack? Do we try and just kill the shade and try and clear this out? Or do we go back and tell the Viscount, hey, you got to leave this guy's stuff up, etc. So they go back to talk to the Viscount, and they go back, and while they're talking to the Viscount and explaining the situation, he's getting upset. The Viscount's getting upset. And at some point, so it's our main elf character that we call Maze. He is kind of the spokesperson on this particular quest. He's kind of been the spokesperson. And so he is parlaying with the Viscount. And the Viscount's getting really agitated and starts snapping at Maze. And it's at some point the Viscount, I'm playing the Viscount. And the Viscount says, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be taking my anger out on you. You've done me a great service here, but it's not done yet, because he's not willing to vacate yet. He's not willing to go into his deep slumber or whatever unless I completely capitulate and just give my, allow him to keep his stuff, on display and so forth. So as a gesture of goodwill, he tells the handmaiden, his wife is there. The Viscount's wife's there. She has a handmaiden. He tells the handmaiden to take a glass of good wine, over to Maze. And he goes, I forgot my manners. I should have offered you something. Here's some wine. So she brings it to him and she hands it to him, and he can feel as she hands it to him that there is a slip of parchment under the glass. So Mays, smartly so and intelligently so, conceals it as he takes it, and he puts the piece of paper in his cloak or whatever, without. And I rolled for it to make sure that no one noticed, and he made the roll was in his favor. No one saw him with the note or whatever. And so he tells the Viscount at this point, he goes, because the Viscount had like a counter proposal, or he was going to decide whether or not he was just going to send them in to kill the shade or whatever. And so the Viscount says, I need to sleep on this and decide what our next move is. So Mays leaves and immediately reads the note, and it says, meet me by the Grand Oak outside in the tree line that's marked with our symbol, Judith. And that's the Viscount's wife's name. And the symbol she wrote on there was like a druidic symbol, because our elf is a druid ranger. He is dual class now. And so he recognized it. So he meets her out there at, I think it said at midnight or whatever. So she comes running out. She's all hooded and cloaked and everything else. And she says, listen, she says, you guys are the only people that might be able to help. And she gives him a little book. And it's a diary of her great great aunt that was of this, and we kept calling him a dickhead. This Viscount, this dickhead, his family had the keep for a while. And apparently his ancestor had challenged who is now the guy who's now the Shade, that Baron Logan Seaborn. So this current Viscount, his ancestor had challenged that Baron, who is now the Shade, to a duel with sabers or whatever, because that guy, and that was, let's see if I got the name right here. Let's see here. Thomas von Trotman. So the current Viscount is a von Trotman, and Thomas was the guy that challenged the guy who's now the Shade to this duel, because Thomas had insulted his bride-to-be, the guy who's the Shade now. And he called her a whore or whatever, and of course that meant for honor they had to duel, etc. Well, what happened was the Shade is killed. The guy, his name was Logan, and he's killed not fairly though, because this von Trotman guy had snipers with bows and arrows who shot him when they were getting ready to duel or whatever, and killed him. And then he had any witnesses that did not swear secret about it, or they didn't think they could trust, he had them killed on the spot. And he basically said he had some of his people that were loyal to him swear that not only did the Shade guy, Logan, say that if he lost the duel, that von Trotman could have the keep, but also the hand of his bride-to-be, because she was betrothed to him, that he could have both, even though none of that was true. This was a land grab, and he killed him during this duel with snipers, cheated the whole bit, killed the witnesses, the whole bit. So he basically takes the land and the woman, which is, it turns out she's the one who left the diary, the one that's being given to our party right now, the great grand aunt or whatever of this Judith that's now married to the dickhead. And so she is so distraught. This is going back to the great grand aunt, that rather than being married to this von Trotman guy that cheated the Seaborn out of everything, Logan Seaborn out of everything, she commits suicide. Now, she was a druid. Logan was a druid, the one who's now the Shade. And the great grand niece, who is now married to the dickhead, who is a descendant of the guy who cheated the other guy out of everything, Judith has now been having to practice her druidic religion in secret because she knows if her husband found out, he'd have her killed or whatever. So this diary, she found it. Judith found it down in those catacombs, hidden. And she says this has the full account of what happened, how he cheated the Shade, Logan, out of everything, his woman, his land, the keep, the whole bit. And it's probably the reason why the Shade can't rest. And she goes, but if I was to turn this over to anybody else, they're all loyal to my husband. And again, he would have me killed and they would burn this and no one would ever see it. But you guys can do something with this. And she gives it to him and then she has to take off. She's like, I've already been gone too long. And now don't forget, her husband's also been openly banging this Astorga chick, who's now dead. And it completely, he didn't care about his wife's feelings at all. So she has no reason to stay with him. She's only there because the current guy told her father, Judith's father, hey, you still owe us somebody from a female from your family, because the other one was betrothed to the guy who won the keep in the duel, but she killed herself before it could be done. So you still owe me. And that's how Judith became this guy's wife. So it's been underhanded the whole time, right? So the party now is faced with, here's where it comes down, soup comes down to nuts. And they have to decide. They have several options here. They can outright accuse, with the book, they can accuse the current Viscount of all this treachery and bullshit, and his ancestors as well. How they got the keep was through a cheat. It was elite, through ill-gotten gains, etc. And the fact that he blackmailed Judith's father into giving her hand to this guy, that was all done through blackmail, or what do you call it? I can't think of the other term right now, but so they could either approach him, and that wouldn't probably go very well because everybody's loyal to that guy. They'd probably have to fight their way out of that or whatever. That's one way they could go. Another way is they could go back to the Shade and decide to clear the Shade out, try and kill the Shade out, clear that all out, and either try and keep the keep for themselves, for the party, and fight this von Trautmann Dick, this Viscount guy, and his men and his army or whatever. That's another way they could go with it. Or they could go to the king in Furundi, who's over this whole area, King Jaska. Well, that's the way they decide to go. They decide to, I get to see right off the bat, I get to see here how to block somebody, right? Let's see here. Okay, there we go. Just remove that. I guess I may have to get a moderator at some point. So where was I? So they decide they're going to go the diplomatic route, and they're going to go to the king. So they travel to the king, and our elf, who happens to be very well-mannered and diplomatic, is the one who decides to go and approach the king, explain everything to the king, produce the book, and say, look, this is what this is. It appears that land and that keep do not belong to that family. It actually belongs to the Seaborn family. However, they've all been wiped out, and the Shade, we believe, is the one who was initially cheated out of the whole thing, and that's why he can't rest. So the king decides, okay, I'm going to need to have this by my sages are going to have to look at this document and determine if it's authentic, and they're going to have to look into some of the other history behind the keep and all that. And the king acknowledges at that point, he says, by the way, he goes, this Viscount guy, he's not really a Viscount. He's a Baron. His ancestor, just when he got the keep, he just started calling himself a Viscount. And he basically asserted his power over the other barons in the area. And as the king, as long as he paid his taxes and so forth and so on, the King Jaska didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He was like, I'll just let him call himself a Viscount. Who gives a shit, whatever. But that also adds to his crimes now that this is all coming to fruition. So the king says, the next day they all get there together, and then the king's like, yeah, they think that this diary is authentic. And it just turns out that all the records from that time period mysteriously were burned or lost in a fire right after that duel where everything was lost and everything. So we think that this is all probably pretty much true. So he says get a platoon or a battalion of men and march on the keep. We're going to reclaim it for the throne, and that's what they do. So they go back and our party devises a way to get the wife away so that she's not accused of being the one that tipped everybody off. And they do that. And the bottom line is that the Viscount Baron, who's pretending to be a Viscount, he has to surrender to the king because they're outnumbered. And the bottom line is that the king says he leaves the keep to Judith, the wife of this supposed Viscount, who is now being taken into custody to stand trial for his crimes, etc., and for his whole family's crimes. And so, am I a robot? Why? Because I'm. Are you talking to this Misa person? Oh yeah, that looks like a bot too, doesn't it? Okay. Yeah, I'll have to. At some point, I'm going to have to figure out somebody that wants to be a moderator, and they can take care of that shit while I'm trying to tell a story here. So I'm going to ignore it for now. But so she ends up getting the keep, and she pays our party the remaining 20,000 per person, their reward, because the Shade, hearing that the king has done the right thing and that all of his family's adornments and so forth are going to be left in tribute and everything, the Shade says, yes, now I can rest. And he, along with what he calls his pets, who you can hear, they can hear them behind that busted up wall. They can hear these, whether they're ghouls or wights or whatever. He silences them with the wave of his hand, and then he dissipates, apparently for eternal slumber. So the bottom line is the Viscount got what was coming to him. The Baron, who's pretending to be a Viscount, got what was coming to him. The Shade is able to finally rest after being cheated out of his land and his wife-to-be and all that. And Judith gets her revenge, probably isn't the right, her justice for being forced to marry that dickhead. And she inherits the keep and promises to keep it operating in the Druidic tradition that it always was before they cheated that family out of it, the Seaborn family out of it. So that's how that chapter ends. Now that could have went a lot of different ways. They could have tried to fight the Shade. They could have tried to fight the Viscount. They could have tried to accuse the Viscount. They could, if they fought the Viscount and won, then they go to the king and say, hey, we just did this. Then it's their word. They look like maybe murderers. And then it's harder for them to prove their case that he was actually, a criminal or whatever. The best possible way for them to handle it is the way they did, was to go straight to the king, get the king to get on their side and deal with it properly. And that's how they did it. So now we have closed that whole loop of the Shade. And now our party has an ally out here in this part of the kingdom, in this part of the realm, I should say, with this keep and Judith, etc. They have all of that. If they ever need a favor in this part of the land, or let's say they get into some kind of a they get their tails in a ringer, let's say, they might be able to call in a favor with Judith, you see. And so it's all part of, because I try to develop the whole realm. And our party has already gone all the way down south to Cauldron, where there was a volcano and there was a cult down there. They've dealt with that. So they have that as an ally. Now they've dealt with the Shade. They have that as that keep as an ally. Now they can go back to the temple, or they can go a different direction and go do something else. But the Shade business is officially closed, and they made a nice chunk of change from it. So Whew, that was quite a story. And that's the second time I've done, because I did it Friday, but I was playing all the NPCs doing that. I hope are there any questions? Because that was a lot of shit I just threw at you guys. But that's the whole story. So, okay, so how much of the side adventure do you have planned, and how much is made up as you react to your players, what your players are doing? Okay, now here's the crazy part about this. I do my best thinking, believe it or not, in the shower. When I'm in the shower, and I like to take nice long showers. I like the hot water, feels good on the muscles, and everything. And it gives me I have time to think. I came up with the idea for the shade while I was in the shower. I thought, what if there's this shade type character that's overtaken a keep? And that's all I had. It was just like, what if there's this like undead who's like taken over a whole castle or whatever and is demanding tribute? And I thought, well, what if, and then I thought, well, what if like the king or whoever's it belongs to, what if it's like their right hand person is actually it's a grift, and they just made up the shade to get all this tribute stuff, and then they're keeping it. Like, that's how it originally was my idea. And the whole idea of it tying it into the temple came later. I came with that idea later, and the whole Astorga. So Astorga was the one that was like the right hand person, but instead of her keeping it for herself or whatever, I tied it in with the temple, that it was being smuggled to the temple. So that killed two birds with one stone. It kept them interested in the temple, and it had this side thing where they could actually get quite a nice big reward. Now, the idea with when they got everything at the temple and decided to come back, I didn't have any of the idea for the diary and the whole backstory of, as far as, I knew there had been a duel. I'd come up with the idea that there had been a duel, and that's how the shade got screwed over, was a duel somehow. That's all. I mean, I knew that. But then I fleshed out the day that we played on Friday. I fleshed out the whole story of the details of the duel, who was involved, how the families were involved, the betrothed of the original woman who was going to be that guy's wife, who ends up committing suicide because she was supposed to be marrying the Seaborn guy, but he gets killed, and then she doesn't want to marry this other guy, this Von Trotman dude, and so she kills herself and everything. And it turns out that's this girl's great grand aunt. And then I figured out the diary part, and I did all that on Friday. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I came up with all that shit. It all started with an idea in the shower. So the shade. And what I do is, if I get an idea for a hook like that, for a plot hook, as soon as I have it, so like at that time I was in the shower, because as soon as I get out to get dried off and everything else, I come in and I write it down somewhere so I don't forget it. And then I have a file on my computer with anything I've got written down. At some point, I'll put down and put it on the computer, which of course I have backed up to the cloud and so forth. So I don't lose my ideas that way. And that's how I come up with that's how my creative ideas come. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it did. So, anyway, that's where we ended. We ended right there. As they got rid of the shade, they got the reward. Now they have to decide: do they go back to the temple? Do they take another path at some point and go somewhere else? Because I've laid the groundwork for them to go to the Against the Giants campaign, which, even if you're a 5th edition player, you're familiar with that. Even though originally it was a Greyhawk adventure way back in the day, which of course I have all the original modules. So I've laid the groundwork for that, and I've got some other plot hooks that I've got out there, and we've got we've got the Sons of Vengeance, who are supposedly looking for this group because of Wendell the Dirty. How Wendell the Dirty was, they believe, his family believes that our party is responsible for his death, or his disappearance at least. So that's out there too, So anyway, that's where we are on that. If there's anything else anybody wants to talk about, put it in the chat. Let's see here. Is there any? No, we're at the bottom here. So it looks like there's only 2 people in here now anyway. So looks like probably Richie and one other person maybe. Unless this of course is not accurate again. So anyway, anybody got anything to want to talk about, or are we going to wrap this thing? It's at 50 minutes, so we're going on an hour. My voice can't take a whole lot more. So like I said, that's the second time I've had to relive that whole thing. Friday, that was a blast on Friday, because one of the things that I forgot to mention was that they had a random encounter along the way. They had to fight a bunch of giant ants that I rolled up, and that was random. And one of the party members it was actually an NPC. It was a hireling or a henchman, got eviscerated by just a bunch of ants, just these giant 2-foot ants, and they just eviscerated him. He was below -10, so he couldn't even be. He was gone, and so there was that too. That happened on the way back to the shade business. So, all right, guys. Well, if there's nothing else, that is where we're going to end it. I think I'm not seeing any more chat. If there is any more chat, I'm not seeing it. The box is still there, but okay, guys. Well, nothing else. Have a great night, Richie. I think you're the only one left. It looks like it's possible. By the way, did I answer your question? I'm going to assume I did answer your question. Colin instead. So it looks like the 2 people were Colin and Richie. So, well, have a good night, guys. We'll catch you on the flip side. Oh, John, you're here. Okay, there you go. Yeah, John, you missed. I don't know how much of that you missed, John, but you'll see it on the playback. So, we'll catch you guys next time. Good night.